Our next speaker is someone who has been defending comprehensive education, who became particularly active when the white paper came out suggesting that every school should become an academy, and mobilised thousands or tens of thousands of people against it. Madeleine Holt from Rescue Our Schools.
Thank you, everyone. I brought a little bit of fun at the end of what I'm afraid is quite a serious speech. Someone said to me, you've got to have a joke in your speech, but at the moment what's happening to state education is unfortunately not a laughing matter. And once again I follow Kevin, which is always difficult because he just stands here and does it all off the top of his head, and I've written my notes out religiously, but I'll try and do a bit of a blend of Kevin's style and my more sort of rigorous style, favourite word of Nick Gibb. Just to tell you a little bit of background, so Rescue Our Schools, as John said, was set up just after the government's ill-fated white paper. So that was back in March, because as parents we felt enough was enough. About 6 or 7 of us all over England founded Rescue Our Schools, hence the life belt, which is part of our logo. And some of us had fought long, hard battles against academisation within our communities, and even won. And then when the government came along and said, right, we're going to turn your schools back into academies again, we felt, that's it, we've got to get up, and we've got to fight, and we've got to mobilise people. And it was the last straw, the white paper, and also, of course, the so-called benignly expressed fair funding formula to redistribute money from mainly urban areas to rural areas. But we didn't just want to fight that, we wanted to fight cuts in school funding, as I've said, getting rid of parent governors, and watering down teacher qualifications. So we took to the streets with the People's Assembly March in London on April 16th. And since then, we have, of course, as you know, had not so much the U-turn on academisation, but more what we would call an S-bend on academisation. Because it's still there, it's still lurking in the background. We hear through our Facebook page that schools are constantly deciding to become academies. They're usually clobbered into it by the governors or by the head, or even people who've been high up in the local education authority who seem to have decided it's the way forward. And so we've been fighting on all fronts, and of course we have had not only the academisation change decision, but a new education secretary, and parent governors have now been rescued. So the government is no longer going to get rid of the requirement to have elected parent governors in schools. So along with a lot of other people, many of you here today, of course, we've helped to make a little bit of a difference, and we keep on fighting. And we take as a huge compliment something you might have heard about, which has been set up in the last few weeks, a so-called grassroots group called Parents and Teachers for Excellence. Now this is aimed at promoting academies and free schools, and it is in fact, as lots of people in Rescue Our Schools who are very good researchers have been finding out, a registered company backed by a Brexit supporter and run by heads of academy chains. But even this rather lame imitation of what we've been trying to do, we find very flattering. And of course, what it acknowledges is that parents have power. There are nearly 14 million households in England with dependent children. So that's a lot of voters, and that's a lot of angry voters. And as Kevin says, this is what we've got to mobilise. And this is what this government is afraid of. So 6 months on, what do parents care about? Well, our Facebook page has a reach of 500,000, and our followers are very committed. They follow every little twitch in the education scene, and very little escapes their notice. So we're gearing up, like Kevin, for cuts. As many of you know, schools are already cut to the bone. My own children's primary school was forced to get rid of 12 teaching assistants just a couple of months ago. So the change on the ground means that instead of having 2 teaching assistants per class, it's just 1 shared between 2 classes. And that debate is given added energy by the waste of even more taxpayers' money on free schools when they're not needed, something that Nick Timothy, Theresa May's Chief of Staff, who's from Birmingham, has said he wants to roll out. And of course by, as Kevin says, the unaccountable excesses in various academy chains, which are constantly now seeing in the papers of people even being sent to prison. But we're also gearing up about SATs. We cannot see a repeat of the nonsense over the summer. I don't know if any of you had children who had to sit SATs. I had 2 of my children we had a double SATs experience in year 2 and in year 6. Personally, as a parent, I don't want to repeat the ridiculousness of the papers that my children have to face. We're also deeply concerned about the teacher recruitment crisis, because the government talks about the importance of a knowledge-based curriculum, and they have this weird dichotomy between knowledge and skills, when anyone with any common sense can see that you need both. So they talk about that, yet there are so many teachers now leaving the profession that the subjects are being taught increasingly by staff who themselves lack the knowledge to pass on to their students. So it's yet another of the many inconsistencies in this government's education policies. We're also gearing up over secondary moderns, because let's be honest and frame the grammar school debate in terms of those schools, because as Kevin says, they will create, if they go through with their policies, which I personally don't think they will, they'll create 3 times as many dump schools as the elite hot houses that come with them. A few things have provoked more hollow laughter among our supporters than the secondary modern plan. It's an issue that's very close to my heart, because I went to a school that was essentially a secondary modern in all but name. That's because it just became a comprehensive before I went there. I'm sure there's lots of people here who perhaps had the same experience. And in the eyes of the community, it was always a secondary modern school. And what that meant was that families with money shunned it, and in my case sent their children to the nearest private schools in Exeter. So what's it like in a school that's not on the winning side? This government talks about winners and losers, about wanting competition in education. Well, speaking from experience of being at a loser's school, it's very quiet. Very little happened. In fact, nothing happened. And most of my classmates, I remember, just drifted off at 16 into low-paid jobs. But not everyone did, because there was a small group of us whose families had encouraged us to be educationally ambitious. And this mindset was infectious. So we were able to double the numbers in our small cohort, so that the students who originally had no intention of going to university did just that. And that is surely the argument for educating everyone together. And as Sir Michael Wilshaw, the outgoing head of Ofsted, put it recently, it changes the tone of a school. And I'm not saying by any means that going to university is the be-all and end-all. I don't think it is, and I think that at the moment we see a kind of intellectual snobbery about that, as if that's the only thing that matters. But nor is it the solution to create a segregated system where the very thought of going to university seems wildly inappropriate and out of reach. And as for the evidence, as Kevin says, only this week research suggested that there was no difference in academic performance if you went to a grammar school or you stayed in a comprehensive. It's just not true. If you get your kid into a grammar school, they'll do better. There's no difference in the qualifications. So why still pursue this educational segregation? Well, I was typing out last week for the Rescue Our Schools website the last article written by my dad, who set up his own comprehensive in what was the full storm of educational equality in the late 60s. And he then became an academic, and he wrote only in April of this year, in England, the idea of the common school has never taken root. There's always been some longed-for alternative, usually some form of selective school. The idea of turning every school into an academy is not to be dismissed, stress on every school. The problem is that in the divisive English style, there will be general academies, but also specialist academies, where students will be coached for Oxbridge entry. And lo and behold, only in the last few weeks, the Education Minister, Nick Gibb, reveals that multi-academy trusts, or MATs, would be encouraged to make one school within their chain, oh, surprise, surprise, a selective one. Back to my dad. Until we accept the idea of the first-rate common school in our own locality, we are doomed to pursue these peculiar and wasteful fantasies. You'll be very happy to hear this. He died a few months ago, and I actually last saw him in Birmingham on his 84th birthday. So, thank you. So what hope is there that these peculiar fantasies will finally be ditched? Angela Rayner's words are, I think, very cheering, but at the end of the day, it will be down to parents. As we put it at Rescue Our Schools, it's time to get not party political, but parent political. If MATs start creating these hot houses within their chains, and there's an argument that they won't need legislation to do this, will the 80% of parents whose kids get dumped in the other schools really stand for it? Will they stand for this secret segregation which becomes not so secret when their own children are being bussed off to the not so flagship schools? I don't think so. But we need to keep the pressure up, and we need to do it in all manner of eye-catching ways, which is why, hang on a minute, I brought with me some of our some of our props, because afterwards, because I know that social media is the thing now, I'm a bit of a Luddite. Anyway, these are we have these, we go on our demonstrations. This is actually a souvenir from a German yacht club, which I got on the internet, because it's the cheapest way of getting it. And this is, as you can see, a string of rags, and afterwards, if anyone wants to join me, I'll be down there. If we can have some kids, that'd be great. We're going to create a ring of rags. This is sort of a metaphor for the life belt, and we'll put it on Twitter with the catchline that selection is rejection, just to get it out there. Because as Kevin says, we've just got to keep fighting on all fronts. And to return to a rather more serious note, we have to keep challenging the propaganda, the dogma, and the doublespeak that so much of current educational policy amounts to. We can rescue our schools from segregation, from SATs, and from cuts. We can, and we are doing it because we are changing the terms of the debate. Thank you.